In this episode, I'm going to talk to you about why you should review your image archives from time to time and look for images that might benefit from your new Photoshop skills. And I'm going to walk you through a recent image of mine that I gave an upgrade to with some digital makeup. Stay tuned for this week's episode of The Last Frame. Hey gang, how's everybody doing? So, digital makeup, reviewing your archives, what's this all about? So we've got a couple topics rolled into one tonight. And again, no script, no notes tonight. I did do a little bit of prep and record a video of the retouching process that I walked through so that you can see it almost in real time. But this is all off the top of my head, so you're going to get it raw and real and the way that I think about it. So first of all, the primary topic is why you should review your archives from time to time. And based on the fact that I retouched an image and give you the sense that it's about finding good images that you may have overlooked, that's really not why I want you to review your archives. Honestly, the biggest benefit to reviewing your image archives is number one, your ego. Well, hopefully your ego. And that is just so that every so often you can remind yourself of how far you have come in your photography journey. Now, be realistic. I realize some of you are going to joke right away and say, yeah, that's the problem. When I look, it's not that far. Well, let's face it, that probably means that you haven't really been putting in the time or the effort, or maybe you haven't been able to, right? But the other reason for going through those archives, especially if you're one of the ones that are going to say, well, I haven't really made it that far, you need to go through your archives. That means your archives are full of less than ideal images, probably full of images with lots of mistakes, probably full of images that could be improved upon and that you really wish you could improve upon. So why look at your bad pictures? Easy. None of us have the time to get out and practice and shoot as much as we want to. It's just life. Most of you have jobs, you have families, you got stuff going on, and we can't be 24/7 with a camera in hand. You hear me talk all the time about how important it is to practice and to build that experience and build your visual database. The visual database is the photographer's ability to look at a scene and notice that the lighting is contrasty, to pick up a camera and aim it at a subject and not miss the telephone pole growing out of the person's head, to photograph the pretty model and not miss the hairband on her wrist. All of these things are things that go into the visual database. Well, there's another way to help you build that skill set. Now, nothing replaces great practice. Let me be really clear. But honestly, it is tremendously beneficial to go back through your older images and select some along the way and really start to ask yourself the questions. Why don't I like this? What was I really trying to accomplish when I took this picture? What was I hoping, or what did I think it would turn out like? Look at the details in the picture. Pay attention to the idea of, would this shot have been so much better if you were shot from a lower angle or a higher angle or with a different lens? Did you just completely overexpose it and really can't be saved? Maybe you should have moved a little bit left, a little bit right. Maybe your timing wasn't right. Maybe it was one of those moments where not spray and pray, but we probably should have done a little burst to grab that action that we knew was about to happen, but we missed it with one frame. Analyze your image. And basically what you're doing is you're asking yourself, what do I need to do to make it better? By doing this, several things happen. Number one, you are loading into your visual database the same kind of mistakes and the same kinds of experiences, not 100%, but the same kinds of mistakes and experiences that you can get by picking up your camera and going and practicing. And I can't say this enough times. There is no substitute for a camera in hand practicing. However, in absence of that, this is a great way to do it. Also, what you are doing is you are learning to form opinions. Now, I know I'm on YouTube right now. Most people on YouTube are not short of opinions, whether it's people like me talking or whether it's people like you watching and typing in the comments. I know you have opinions, but I mean opinions on your own work. This especially applies to those of you who frequently say, I want to improve, but I just don't know what questions to ask about my work. I just don't know how to look at my photographs and know what needs to be improved. Trust me, folks, you don't want somebody to tell you that. You need to decide that so that you are shooting for you, period. You want to develop your style for you. You want to shoot the way that you want to shoot. It's all about you. It's the only part that's about you, really. So you should be doing this every so often. I actually do it, not nearly as often as I would like to, but I will say that the last year, being in a pandemic, being in lockdown, being stuck in this 8-foot by 10-foot room where I create all of this content, I have actually had a little bit more time to do that. Also, full disclosure, again, my goal is to let you guys know how I think and what I think so that you can be afraid, very afraid. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that once the pandemic hit, I pretty much stopped posting. I wasn't going to post selfies during the pandemic. I use my Instagram profile as a learning platform. As you know, if you follow me on Instagram, and if you don't, hey, come on, it's at Joe Edelman, right? All of my posts, you can swipe. You're going to see lighting diagrams. You're going to see sometimes behind the scenes photos or video clips. You're going to see gear lists. I try to make my Instagram posts informative and educational. So I wasn't generating any new content because I couldn't photograph models. I'm getting close. I've got one vaccine in. I get my next one next Thursday, and then 2 weeks. And let's face it, it's not like the world's back to normal at that point, but at least I can start to interact with people more. I can start to bring people in my studio, probably still masked except for the model, but I can do it without the fear of dying in the process, right? So I am chomping at the bit to get back to shooting. Now, you know that I talk to you guys about practice all the time. You know that I've admitted that even when I'm going to a trade show or do a demo, I actually practice before I go. So I am in the process right now of kind of trying to gear things up. I found a local model, a young lady who was in the picture that I posted last week, the kind of sci-fi looking picture with a composite background. She's a local girl. She's appeared in some other photographs that I've done. She works in a job where she's getting tested 3 times a week. She's been very safe and very cautious throughout the pandemic. So I'm actually paying her to come into my studio every 2 weeks. We do it on a Sunday, 2 hours. I'm double masked, but I am picking up a camera and practicing to start building up my muscle memory with my cameras. I'm also starting to get back into doing Photoshop more aggressively, more consistently. And so that's where this exercise came from. So basically what I did, this is from a series of images that I had shot in 2016 and 2017 of my makeup artist, Monet, who you guys have seen routinely in many of my videos, both as the makeup artist and as the subject. And we were doing some images that were going to be used to illustrate some slides that I needed to create for a presentation about DIY backgrounds. And if you've seen my video on DIY backgrounds, this is that crushed velour material that I talk about in that video. So we had done a series of shots here, and of course, she brought a few different outfits. This one, it was okay. I was happy with it. I just wanted a simple shot to show how you could coordinate colors and how you could get a little bit of texture off the background. That accomplished its goal. You always hear me talk about work the shot. And this is not, by the way, every single frame, but it's the majority of the frames. So even though I was shooting for an illustration about the material and the backgrounds, I still shot some close-ups, mostly 3/4 length. I did not have the background set up for full-length shots. And then I had Monet change both her hair and her outfit, and she also changed her eyeshadow. So, she went to a wig, okay, which is shorter wig, and she went to this outfit, and I went to, like, a, light brown textured background. Again, crushed velour type material. And these images were fine for that purpose. They satisfied the need of what I wanted. Obviously, these are not my normal, crazy, creative makeup beauty shots. That's not what I was tasking myself with that day. However, towards the end, as I started to work the shot and get a little bit closer, because by the way, I, whoops, I missed it here. Let me scroll down. Sorry to make it easy there. I just didn't really like the outfit. I didn't think it was particularly flattering. And equally as much my fault, I was not coming up with some incredible idea for an interesting posture or pose at that point, and I didn't need it. I liked what I had for the red ones. So I gave up on the full length, but then, even doing closer shots, you can see, I'm dealing with the zipper and that, which is kind of bulky and clunky, just didn't really like it. Okay. And since, of course, I was also, shooting for YouTube and for presentations at camera clubs and such, I wasn't going to do anything that was kind of like sexy or glamour, like with the zipper open. So towards the end of this series, I decided, you know what? The makeup is really clean. I liked the way the makeup looked. So let's go ahead and do some close-ups. And I got in really, really close at first, and then did a kind of dramatic tilt with the camera. And in fact, these two images, the ones that you can see that I have marked as red, they were kind of two images that I just kind of earmarked them and said, you know what? I really like them. There's just this particular image. There's just something that I liked about the angle. And obviously, by the other way, gang, you're seeing these as shot in camera, right? These images aren't cropped in post. This is cropped in camera. This is the shot. So I kept going back and looking at this images, and I even went so far as to do the skin retouching on this image. And then I kind of set it aside because I didn't really have a use for it. It wasn't something that I felt was going to add to my portfolio. It didn't fit with all the beauty and the fashion portraits that I post on Instagram. Because remember, it's not about how many pictures you post on Instagram, right? It's about quality. So, but I liked the image, so I just held on to it. So in the course of going back through my images and looking for opportunities, I came across this image again and I said, you know what? I've seen a couple tutorials over the years where they have taken an image, put it into Photoshop, and essentially created makeup digitally. Now, of course, there are programs now like Portrait Pro where, you can literally take a person with no makeup and put all kind of makeup on them. And I hate to say this, but it actually works pretty well. However, before you go out and buy that software, please, while it works pretty well and it's very capable, most photographers suck at it because they're lazy and they're impatient and they just do the auto clicks or they do everything at 100%. And then, regardless of their subject, male, female, whatever, they look like a drunk drag queen by the time they're done with the makeup they've applied. So, that is not the way to approach it. But if you have the patience and you are willing to really learn that software, and it's got quite a learning curve to use those tools properly, it's pretty impressive. But I want to do something that was a little bit more creative, kind of in my genre of shooting, something that fits. So I thought, you know what? I am going to do kind of one of these crazy kind of makeup shots where I go ahead and I apply makeup to the model's face. So what I'm going to show you now that I've given you that setup is I'm going to take you through my entire step-by-step process of doing it. The actual process took about 45, almost 50 minutes. You're going to see about a 32 or 33-minute version of it. So there's a couple spots where I sped it up, but I promise you I have left out no detail. And I'm talking through the whole thing, so I'm explaining to you why I'm doing what I'm doing, etc. It's a good question here from Redden. Let me just go ahead and actually put this up on the screen now before we go into the video. So, digital art or photography, is there a line that makes it to one realm or the other? No longer, Redden. In my opinion, not at all. Now, there are plenty of snobs, arrogant artists, arrogant photographers who are territorial and feel that what they do is better than what the next guy does. This is an image that was taken with a camera. It has been digitally enhanced. Some people would call it art, and they would put it on a wall as if it were a piece of art. Other people would say, nah, that's just a Photoshop piece. I like things more real. And that's cool. But since I create primarily with a photographer, I choose to consider it photography. But at the same time, photography is digital and it is art. So that's my approach to that. All right. So let me dive in with this video here, gang, and I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, so here is my image that has been retouched. I've taken care of the facial blemishes. Okay, so here's the retouched image. I've taken care of a few facial blemishes, cleaned up the eyes a little bit, and a few flyaway hairs. So up here in my layers panel, I can go ahead, I'll turn off retouch. You can see the original file. There are your blemishes, a few flyaways here on the outside, a few stray hairs that were coming down through here, and then retouched there. So now the task is, ultimately, as I look at this image, it's very strong in eye contact. I like it, but it's also kind of bland. Doesn't have a whole lot going on. Nothing that really makes it jump, right? So you know that I'm a big believer in get it right in camera, and that's always the goal. And I'm a big believer in having a creative plan when we do a shoot. And in fact, this particular shot was actually part of another shoot that I did 5 years ago for a YouTube video. And the shots just kind of always stuck around. There's something about it I like, but it's just not quite enough. So I'm going to try a technique where I'm going to add some makeup to this shot in Photoshop and see if we can turn it into something that's maybe a little bit eye-catching and, shall we say, Instagram worthy. So now, one of the first things that I do almost all the time is I'm going to see if this image will work in a 16:9 format. I'm not saying or suggesting that this is something that you should do. I do it because my images routinely wind up in a video, or for that matter, even in a keynote or PowerPoint presentation that is 16:9 format. So it's always nice to be able to fill the screen with that format as opposed to having, the black bars on the sides. So my first step, I am going to go ahead and make that a little bit smaller. I'm going to grab my crop tool. I'm going to set it, well, actually, before I do that, you know what? I'm going to set my crop tool at 1:1 square, and I want to see how this will look as an Instagram square image. And indeed, that's kind of what I was imagining, but I'm thinking if I have a little bit of extra space, I can get just a bit more background and I can maybe add some color to that background. And I'm thinking that's actually kind of where I'd ultimately like to go. So with that in mind, now that you're seeing how that crop tool looks, I'm going to release that. I'm going to set my crop tool format back to 16:9, and I am going to go ahead and expand this canvas a little bit. I'm going to reduce the tilt on her ever so slightly. And I know from past experience, while content aware fill will fill in up here at the top of the image where her hair is, it's not going to do as great a job there because of all that really fine detail in the hair. And I don't really need extra hair at the top. So on this little tilt that I'm doing, and you can see it's very, very slight, I'm still going to keep the top of the image kind of as is. I'm not going to add to that. So I will go ahead and commit to that. Now, certainly what I have is a composition where she's pretty much shoved all the way over to the left. But keep in mind, this could potentially make an interesting title slide with text, things like that. So in my world, that's kind of how I'm establishing my priorities. I would love to be able to have that horizontal format to work with, but then I also need or want, in this case, a square image so that I can use it on Instagram. So that being said, now I've got a lot of blank space there and I need to kind of get that filled in. So I am just going to take my magic wand. I'm going to select all that extra blank space that's up there. And whoops, we didn't want quite that much. Let's make this a little bigger so that we can also select that area there. There we go. So it does have to do a little bit of filling in on the top. And now I'm going to go ahead and do edit, content aware fill. And it's going to bring up the interface there. I'm going to draw out the selections with her face because I don't really want it to sample from her face or her hair for that matter. There we go. And I can already see as I look over here on the preview. Let's make that a little bit bigger if we can. Can I make that bigger? Apparently I can't. Okay, so I can already see it's doing a good enough job. For the sake of you guys, I'll go ahead and apply it. There you can see. And then I'm going to click OK and select that. I want to deselect. You can see that I've got a little bit of a gap here along the way that we're going to need to fill in later. And that's okay. We can work with that. Not a problem. In fact, I will come back to that. Okay. I want to try and get started on what I'm going to do with the makeup. So I'm thinking of some crazy color combinations here, like some purple and some like bright fluorescent green, almost like chroma key green screen kind of colors, but also some yellows and some blues and some oranges. Now, let me also explain, I suck at drawing. That's why I'm a photographer, because I can't draw pictures, so I need to take pictures. Additionally, at the moment, I am not able to use my tablet. So I'm doing all this work with a mouse, which makes things even harder yet. So that being said, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add an additional layer, and we're going to call this top makeup. I'll rename it so that we can stay organized. And before I even start, I want to change the blend mode on this layer to multiply right there. Okay, we're going to leave the layer at 100% opacity. And I'm going to come down here into my color palette and I'm going to look for kind of an interesting purple to start with, kind of a deep purple. And I'm going to grab a brush. Now, I want you to notice with this brush, I'm going to start for this first piece with the top part of her face and do it around 500 pixels. I'm at 492 pixels at the moment. But notice my hardness is really, really soft. It's down at 13%. Brush mode stays at normal. Opacity, we may be able to do it 100, but we also may need to dial that back a little bit. So we'll see. Now, the key to this as I'm doing these multiple passes here is to never release the mouse click. Because if I release the mouse click, it's going to paint over and it's going to make certain areas darker than others. So once I start drawing, I've got to keep that mouse click depressed and finish the draw before I move on. So I am going to try this, and it may take several attempts, right? I'm going to start here. I'm going to come across her face like so, like so. And then as long as I keep the mouse depressed, I can keep painting in and I get the same even color all over the top part of her face. Now, before I go any further, that's kind of close to where I wanted to start. But, oh, and by the way, here's a great example. The reason why I had to keep the mouse clicked, notice how I missed a little bit of skin right up at the top here. If I press and I click again to fill that in, see how it gets darker a little bit in there, and you don't want that to happen. But it doesn't matter. I'm going to get rid of all that. What I'm noticing is that at 100%, It's a little darker and a little deeper than I ideally would like. So I'm just going to go ahead, back to the blending change, and I'm going to set this down. Let's go 60% to start, and then we're going to repeat the process. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to come across. I want to try and make that bottom line as smooth as possible. And now that I kind of know that I've got a blend that I want, I'm actually going to draw around the eyes. I could draw over them and mask them back out later, but hey, why do the extra work? I'm here, I'm working on the eyes, so I'll just draw around them, fill in all of the skin on the top. Okay, and so now she's got this interesting purple makeup. I want to make sure that I actually have the bottom of the nose there. Good. Cool. A little bit there in the corner of the eye yet. Before I release the mouse, I'm kind of visually checking everything to make sure that I got all of it. And I can let go of the mouse. Cool. So now I want to do the bottom part of her face. So I'll make a new layer, change the mode to multiply. We're going to call this bottom makeup. Okay, you can call it whatever you want, but I think what I'll do is let's go for that lime green that I was talking about before, crazy bright. And since 60 seemed to work really good with the purple, I'm going to leave things at 60, and I'm going to come in here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of work right up to that line that I've already created and come down, and I don't have to worry about covering all the lips because I want to leave the lips fairly natural. But that gives me, it's actually looking pretty good. Make sure we got everything over there. Good. And now you see how I'm getting the green out here over the hair and over the background? It's not going to matter because we're going to do some real simple masking as we get going. But so far, I'm kind of digging where I'm at with that, right? But now I want to get the skin from her neck and her shoulders. I want that to have some color too. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add another color. So let's do another layer. We'll call it shoulders. And I am going to change that to multiply again. And from a color standpoint, let's get a bright yellow, like really bright yellow. There we go. And same thing now that I'm there. Good. And again, doesn't matter that some of the colors are overlapping. I know it looks really sloppy right now. We're going to fix that super, super simple with a series of masking. So since I know that I can do it, I'm just going to get all my color into place, and then I'll go back and I'll do all the masking. Pretty much 1, 2, 3. Okay. So now I want to do another one. I want to give some color to the hair. I mean, given everything else color, why not do the hair? So let's do the hair in kind of a bright blue. And because the hair is black, really all I'm going to be doing is adding to kind of the highlights of the hair, but I am going to bring the opacity of my color up a little bit. And I need to remember to change that layer to multiply. In fact, I should show you, if you forget to change it before you start painting, obviously that looks insane, right? I mean, we lose all the detail, but don't worry. Go ahead and do it anyway. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to paint all the hair blue. Look at all of it. And just like the other stuff, it's going to overlap in some places. So I'll get all the hair blue, especially the areas where there's highlights. That's really important. The shadow parts of the hair won't matter as much. So we got that. And now all I have to do is if I go back, change it to multiply, boom. Now I have hair with a blue tone to it. So now we have the background. Well, why not give the background some more color? I mean, we're adding tons of color into this thing, right? So let's do another layer, call it background. So now I've got all the colors drawn in, and I have what looks like kind of a blurry mess going on here, right? So let's turn off each of these layers except for the very first one, the top makeup. So the top makeup is actually, that was probably the cleanest one that I did. If I put a mask in, just by clicking the mask tool, I want to go with a black brush, definitely harder. I don't want it 100%, but I'm going to go up around 80% or so, considerably smaller, and 100%. Actually, we're going to go a little larger with the brush. And I'm just going to come down here along the hairline. Let me make it a little softer yet. And indeed, I'm going to bring the opacity down. See, the thing with Photoshop, I say this a lot, not that I do a lot of Photoshop videos, but when I do talk about Photoshop stuff, 100% is almost never the answer. There are very few times where you really want to be using 100% in Photoshop, period, right? So now I'm just going to, in fact, let's make it bigger so you can see what we're doing here. But I'm going to go back and I'm going to draw that hairline down and make sure that I still have the skin colored. I don't want any of the purple on the hair because remember, I'm going to make the hair blue. See how those eyelashes came back when I drew them out, right? So we'll go back and take our time here along the edge of the face. That's why we're using a nice soft brush because it's also a little bit more forgiving in the process. Now we'll come over to this side. You can see there's some purple in the hair there. We want to get those highlights back in the hair. Take this purple out of the hair as well. I get all that. Whoops, went a little too far there. You see it? So it's back up. Come back and hit that again. And I think I need to do a pass with a smaller brush here just to get those little bits. A little bit over here. Good. All right. So now we've got the top part where it looks like she's got this purple makeup on her face. So next we're going to add in the bottom layer of makeup. And same thing, we're going to put a mask in, right? And first thing I want to do is I want to clean off. We're going to go back up. We'll do like 80%. A little bit of a harder brush, a little bit of a bigger brush. I want to clean off the neck first. Here, we'll bring this all the way up to 100%. In fact, a little bit more. That way you guys can see. And again, cut me just a little bit of slack. I'm doing this with a mouse today. And the point is, you can work with a mouse, gang. But I will tell you, if you're going to do advanced retouching like this, it really, really makes sense to work with a tablet. Okay. Anytime you're going to do beauty work and interesting work like this, there's a certain amount of time investment that you're going to have to put in, period. Okay. And it's effort. There really are no complete shortcuts. I mean, this technique is actually very simple and very quick, but nonetheless, it requires a lot of attention to detail. And you really do have to, take your time and work through things if you want it to look good in the end. And I'm kind of imagining now as I'm cleaning these lips off, I think I may actually add another color on the lips too. I think I definitely missed an opportunity there. And when I went through this the first time, I was thinking I would leave the lips natural, but I'm realizing, hey, I could put some color on those lips and it would look pretty cool. Okay, let's bring that up bigger. We want to see all that detail. So again, since I'm working with a mouse especially, I'm taking my time. I'm working with a soft brush and I'm just edging things out, trying to get it nice and clean. And we'll come back after we finish this masking and we'll make a decision on what we want to do with the lips. All right, so time to go to a smaller brush here so we can get up into that corner. And again, I can't stress enough. Attention to detail. That's the key. All right. Also, when you're doing stuff like this, make sure you save your images, routinely. God forbid you have a crash or something like that. All right, so we're coming along good. Let's go to the shoulders. And now what I want to do is I want to just go ahead and mask out the background. Oops. And of course, it's not going to cooperate as easily as I had hoped, but we're going to grab all of that. Good. And do the same on the top part of the shoulder. I don't have to worry about getting the whole background, but let's see here. Whoops. There we go. Let me get this back in frame and then option and there we go. I want that part back out and shift so I can get all of that. Good. That's going to get the job done for what I need. And now I'll go ahead and fill that with black. Here, we can do it up here. Edit, fill, foreground color is black, 100%. Whoops, on the wrong layer. Make sure we do it on the mask. Edit, fill, foreground color. There we go. So now I've got the shoulders clear. I just want to make sure on that mask that I'm not coloring the hair yellow. We can go just a little bit bigger. So I want to get all the yellow out of the hair. Notice right here, I just realized I missed some green. So let's go back to the bottom makeup layer and pull that out. So that's the great part about doing it this way also is, as you keep working on the image, if you realize there's spots that you missed, you can still go back and you can fix it, right? So nothing is like 100% committed here. So that's looking pretty good. That's looking good. All right. So we've got the shoulders. Let's come on back here. Good. So I'm actually going to skip on up now to the background just because I'm kind of getting anxious to see how this is going to come together. See, I'm loving those colors now that we're getting to that. So here I'm going to go ahead and grab my magic wand again, set my tolerance. We'll start up around 20 and afterwards. All right, so now that I've got that, I am going to just blur this selection ever so slightly, like 2 pixels. That's it, okay? And come on up to the background and then mask that. Good. And now we have got the background with some good color. I know it's probably causing some of you stress that I haven't taken care of these lines that are in the background. It's really pretty simple. You're going to use the healing brush tool. Mine happens to be set at 87 now. That's fine. Since it's a kind of a blurry background, I am going to soften the hardness down to around 70. So I'll go ahead and I'll do my selection right alongside the line. And then I'm just simply going to draw down the line the whole way down. There we go. I'll let that fill in. That's a really long line, so it's going to take a second. And then I'm going to come over here. I'm going to avoid her skin. I'm going to do the rest of the background piece here. Good. And now I'm going to enlarge it so that we see this little bit with her skin. So the first thing I'll do is, and ideally, you can see I'm doing this on the retouched layer. In a perfect world, just so that I'm teaching you good habits, that really should have been on a retouching layer after the fact, but a little late now. So I'm going to finish where I've already started. So I'll come in here now with the yellow and we're going to fill all of this in. There we go. Whoops, got a little carried away there. The best part when you're doing this kind of retouching too, if you get a little carried away like I just did, just keep going and go back and fix it. You don't have to panic. These are the kind of details where it's not like I'm messing up straight lines or, the edge of a nose or something or blending eyelashes together. So you can just kind of keep drawing and it's going to kind of work itself out, right? So a couple more blemishes that I ideally would have taken care of before, but I'm going to go ahead and smooth those pieces down just a little bit. Good. And we'll continue our way up here. And then we've got to get the edge. There's the edge. And now we can just go right up the side of the image. Get the top part. Across the top here. Whoops. Grab that. And then this last little bit at the very top. Okay, so now I've got that little line from the marquee tool. When I did content aware fill, I could put my orange background back in. So we've got that intense color. That's looking good. And now the last piece we have, let's get that blue hair. So hit the mask and same thing now. What I want to do is I want to come back and I want to grab, whoop, that's not really going to do it, is it? Okay, so let's make sure that I'm on the hair there on the mask. That's it. Good. I got that. And we'll deselect that part. In fact, actually, you know what? Let's go back there a second. Magic wand. I want to filter, or actually select. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to expand that just a little bit by like 3 pixels. Okay. So you notice it's going to creep in on the hair a little bit. Now I'm going to do filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And we're just going to do 1 pixel, right? And then I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do that. It's going to give me a little bit of a softer edge is all it's going to do, which will make it look a little less cut out. But if you look close, I still got some blue that's bleeding over onto the face. So we'll go back to the brush technique at this point. Make sure that it's nice and soft. Bring the opacity up pretty high. And we want to paint that blue out, because we don't want the blue on the face. Okay. And same over in here. Paint that blue out. Paint it out down here. We want the shadows to have natural kind of gray shadow to them. I need to make it a little bit smaller to get up into that corner. And then the last piece right now, I've got bluish eyelashes. So I need to get that white highlight back in the eyelash, right? So there we go. All right. So we're looking pretty good here. But now the question comes, what do we do? What do we do about the lips, right? So I know I'm definitely going to add another color, I think, anyway. I'm going to make a new layer, make it multiply, do lips. And so now the question becomes, what color do we want? So how about, I mean, what if I do a bright red? Since red was selected, I don't know. I wasn't thinking red is the best way to go, but you know what? Let's try it. I'm going to bring the opacity down. Remember, I was working in the 60s or so before. I'm going to bring it down to like a 47. And let's see here. Make that a little bit bigger. Make the brush a little bit bigger. Nice and soft, as you can see. And left click and hold. And I'll draw in here a little bit. Again, it doesn't matter if I go over, because I can fix it in post. But I mean, fix it in post. Yeah, I can mask it and take it out. This is post. But since I'm kind of down to the wire and this is the last piece, I'm gonna try and draw inside the lines. Even when I go out, there you go. We went out just a little bit. So I'll mask that and we'll fix that up. But let's go ahead and do that. Okay, we'll get this edge up here. Make sure we've got the color all the way out to the green. Okay, good. All right, let's get all that bottom there. Now let's just take. Yeah, you know what? I'm kind of digging the red. All right, so let's clean that up. We hit the mask on the lips. Let's make it nice and big again. And we're gonna make it super huge. So you can see, I mean, it's pretty doggone clean, right? It's mainly just this bottom corner. So I'm going to go ahead. I've got my black brush set up. Opacity, we're going to make it pretty high. And I'm going to make that brush pretty small and make it a little harder, like 41 size on 78 on the hardness. And let's make it even smaller yet. Make it even heavier yet and make the opacity even more. And oops, are we actually on there? That's on black, good. And you know what? That edging that I saw, that wasn't me. That was the original makeup. So that being said, let's just bring this layer up top for a second. Yeah, okay, that was the original makeup. So I'm trying to fix something that I kind of don't need to fix. But I'll tell you what I do want to do. I liked the highlight. So again, this is, we talk about paying attention to details. See that lip highlight right here? Okay, and these highlights. So I'd like to get a little of them back. So I think what I'm going to do is, let's go back to the black. I'm going to bring my opacity way down, like 42. Super soft brush. And I just want to, whoops. Let's get that on the mask. I want to bring in just a little bit of that highlighting, right? Just a little to make it have a sense of kind of reality, not there. All right. So now let's see where we're at. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So we're pretty close here. I also want to go ahead and add a little bit of a dodge and burn layer, okay? Mainly just for some background vignetting and things like that. So, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to set my layer to soft light, okay? And come over here, grab the gradient tool, set the opacity down around 38, and I want to pull up from the bottom ever so slight. That's it. And kind of come in this way. Good. Now remember, I'm not going to see all of this in the Instagram version, right? But it's there. It's a piece of what's going on. Okay. So I'm digging that. I also want to add a levels layer here and just kind of bump it up. One of the things that happens when you do this makeup technique is that you tend to darken the image a little bit. That's a big part of why I wasn't using the settings of 100% on the colors. I was kind of toning them down a little. But this also gives me the ability to give a little boost to the contrast. And in the case of this image, boosting the contrast is basically going to bring the skin colors up. And it also brings the highlights out of the hair. So you see how, in fact, here, we'll go back. If I turn this off, boom, there's before the levels, there's after the levels. See how I get that little bit more of a pop? And then if I'd like to see even a little bit more detail just in the hair, and this may or may not work, but we're going to experiment and we're going to see. I'm going to add a hue and saturation layer. I'm going to switch the master to the blues, and I want to see what will happen if I bring the lightness of the blue up. And notice I get even a little bit more detail there. We're going to exaggerate it. Problem is I lose all the color if I go too bright, and if I go too dark, the hair just goes pitch black. But if I lighten it just a little, I get a little bit more detail. And then to make up for the loss of color, I can boost the saturation in the hair. So now that hair color really kind of pops. Now, the other possibility while I am here, and I don't have to do any masking for this, nothing, I'm looking at this, and honestly, it's bothering me just a little bit that her neck is quite as bright as it is. I wish it was just a little darker. So I'm going to switch over to yellow. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab the lightness slider. I'm going to pull the yellows down. Now, of course, that orange is mixed with brown on the background. And you notice it's darkening too. And I'm also, though, I am darkening the shoulders. Problem is, they're getting really flat. So I think I will go back and I will darken those shoulders a little bit with some dodge and burn. I'm not going to do the color, but oftentimes that's an option. I mean, I could even look at greens here. And so there you have it. You guys ask me a lot of the time about Photoshop. I am not a Photoshop master or Photoshop guru. I know how to get the job done. It's not always the simplest, quickest, most efficient. But the reason I wanted to show you this again was to really try and encourage you guys, experiment, play around. I mean, for me, this image, it's very unlikely that this image will hit my portfolio. It is on Instagram. If you want to see the lighting, in fact, actually, let me share the lighting with you, and then I'll go back and kind of give you a little bit more of an explanation. But just really quick here, here's the lighting setup, and we could definitely argue that it's kind of overlit in terms of the way that I would normally light things. Now, when I say overlit, I don't mean overexposed. It's properly exposed. Overlit in the sense that I don't know that it actually needs this many lights. But once again, remember, I was actually doing this shot for something else. So the model, Monet, was standing in front of a light brown background. There was a light behind her that was creating enough light for the background. There were two lights also in the back serving as rim lights, one on camera left, one on camera right, and then my normal 26 centimeter round collapsible softbox was just on camera right. Something that's a little bit different about this shot than what I normally do, because at the time I was also creating some shots specifically for Olympus with this lens. I shot this image with the Olympus 12-100 f4 Pro lens, and it was about 61 millimeter is what the focal length was that I wound up using. But I would expect and I would hope that there are actually quite a few of you that are watching this tonight, or that are going to come along and watch this in the next couple days, that could actually do even cooler stuff in Photoshop. My point is going through the exercise of, number one, setting aside some time. And folks, it's learning time, right? Setting aside some time, going back through images. And this is not the equivalent of dumpster diving for images. One of the things that drives me insane about camera clubs and about a lot of Facebook groups, they'll have a theme for the week, right? And, one week it'll be sunsets. And sure enough, we're in the middle of, spring when it's rainy, or the fall when it's just crappy outside. And everybody goes dumpster diving through their hard drives for sunset images from like the last 5 years, okay? And you see a lot of really, really bad sunset images. What happens in those cases is oftentimes, somebody says sunset, attached to that sunset picture, which is still a really bad sunset picture, but for the person who took it, there's an emotional attachment, their vacation, their trip somewhere, all kinds of things. So it just doesn't work. I'm talking about going back through your images and really analyzing what you did, why you did it, what went wrong, how you can make it better. You don't have to ask anyone about any of those things. You need to make those decisions. You need to decide what is the answer to all of those questions. And then if you come up with a problem, something that you want to be able to do with an image, and you can't figure out how's it going to get done, that's when you reach out and you ask someone. But this makeup painting technique, keep in mind, you could turn around and if you're good at drawing, you could do all kinds of detail on the face. You could do portions of the face. Keep in mind, you could use different brushes. Like you could use like a speckle brush, or download some interesting like star brushes or that, and put patterns and things like that on the face. The possibilities are really kind of endless. As I said, I can't draw very well, so this was kind of a real simple scenario for me. And also, if you paid close attention, and I've already closed it out, so I can't show you right now, but you'll see it when you watch the video back. If you paid really close attention, after I recorded my editing of it, and that was the full thing, I didn't leave anything else, or leave anything out, but I did do one last step before I saved my final image and sent it out to Instagram. And that is that the purple that I wound up with on her face as you watched me record it, it was still a little dark. The more I looked at it and the more I was living with it, it was still just a little too dark. I wanted to see more of the texture. Folks frequently ask me about, do I have texture in my shots? Because usually you see them small, right? So you saw that image blown up, even with all the retouching, when her skin looked perfect, there were still pores throughout her whole face. All the textures there. So that purple was a little too dark. I did go back in, and that's why every color, everything is on its own separate layer, and I lightened that purple just a little and actually made it a deeper purple, but lightened it. So it gave me a little bit more of a polished result that I was okay with. So again, this image will probably never wind up in my portfolio. I'm confident it'll probably wind up in a presentation or two somewhere, and it's going to reside on Instagram. But it was a great exercise. It's a great opportunity, again, to kind of get back in the swing of things. A lot of you, like me, have probably not done nearly as much shooting or nearly as much Photoshop work in the last year as you normally would, or as much as you would have liked to. So it's about getting that muscle memory back, getting the thought process back, and really kind of getting into the swing of things. So I also wanted to point out to you folks, and I left the link in the chat window for you. This week's TOGCHAT podcast is out. It is an interview, and this is an awesome interview, folks, on several levels. It's with LA-based food photographer Christina Peters. If you think it would be interesting to shoot food, if you are hoping to have a career as a photographer, regardless of the genre, if you want to be able to run a business, make money, potentially work as a photography assistant, or even hire photography assistants, if any of those things apply to you, you need to listen to this interview. Christina not only is her work incredible, and she's worked for like every major food brand that you can think of, but she is incredibly forthcoming. In fact, she provided a download. When you listen to the podcast, you'll get a link with a download that goes through the way she develops her rates. It's basically called a 4-day rate plan. It doesn't matter if you're not a food photographer. The information in that rate plan, it applies for all photographers. So I'm actually really proud of this interview because of the amount of information that we got out and because of the breadth of topics that we were able to cover. So, I know a lot of you have been tuning in to listen to Talk Chat. I want you to know that I appreciate that. I'm working really, really hard to continue getting really, really interesting photographers who are able to share a lot of information and a lot of knowledge with you. And for that, gang, please do me a favor. When you listen to the podcast, if at all possible, at least once, listen to it on Apple Podcasts, rate it. 5 stars would be nice. And please leave a review. It takes you seconds to do it. And, I hate having to ask and literally beg for those things, but here's the bottom line. Additional reviews make 2 things happen. Number 1, more people find out about the podcast. Number 2, those reviews and more people finding out about the podcast help me to get sponsors for the podcast, which allows me to pay my bills and continue to bring you all this great content for free. And I'm really, really close to the tipping point where I'm going to be able to start getting sponsors for the podcast. And don't worry, it doesn't mean the podcast is going to be full of ads. Okay, we're talking about like 30 to 60 seconds of an ad at some point in the podcast each week. That's it. So please help a guy out, but definitely check out this podcast. It's not just about food photography, I assure you. Okay, there's a lot of great information in there. We even wind up talking about photographing and lighting cars, automobiles, that kind of stuff. All right. So that pretty much wraps things up for this week's episode of The Last Frame. Please do me a favor, whether you are here now and listening or whether you watch this a couple days later, leave me a comment down below, not in the chat. Let me know how you feel about these Last Frame episodes, and let me know if there are topics or things that you would like me to discuss, okay? And FN89, I did see your question about the outfit and working with models. I have an episode that I'm kind of working through my mind where I'm going to go through that whole planning process with models and communicating about outfits. So I don't want you to think I ignored that question. I kind of left it out because I want to talk about that really, really soon. But seriously, gang, I want this to be your show. The idea is, you know what I do. You give me the topics, tell me how I can help you, and I will give you a 1-hour brain dump of everything that I can pull out about that topic. In the meantime, gang, spring is here, at least in, our part of the world here in the US and, Northern Hemisphere. The weather's starting to get a little bit better. I'm sure we're going to have plenty of rain to deal with, but get out and use those cameras because your best shot, it's your next shot. Adios, gang. Have a safe week. Take care.